Welcome back to Academy Dialogues. It starts with us. Our next discussion is on reaching gender equity in Hollywood. We are honored to have lawyer, academic, and advocate Anita Hill moderating today's discussion. Joining Anita, Oscar-winning actor Gina Davis, Sony Pictures animation executive and Oscar-winning producer Karen Rupert Tolliver, award-winning director Alma Harrell, and Academy governor and composer Laura Cartman. On to you, Anita.
Thank you, Sean. And I want to thank this fabulous panel who has agreed to speak with us and give us some clarity on gender equality in Hollywood. I know that one doesn't, start out as a successful individual in Hollywood. So I have a question that I want to start with everyone here. At some point in your lives, I think many of you, I suppose many of you, or all of you, were dreaming about a career in entertainment. And as you imagine that career, I'm curious about what you thought it would be like, um, and why you were drawn to it. And finally, just if you could all just give me briefly how you made that dream of being in Hollywood a reality. And let's see, where shall I start? I'll start with you, Gina.
All right. It turns out that when I was 3 years old, I announced to my parents that I wanted to be an actor in movies. And I don't know how I even knew that people had jobs at 3 years old, but that was it, and never changed. And majored in acting in college, and was fortunate enough. I mean, I did some modeling. I tried different ways to get into the business, but I eventually got to audition for the movie Tootsie, and I got cast in a sort of supporting role in that, and it was stunning and mind blowing, but at the same time, well, yeah, I mean, this was what was supposed to happen, So everything kind of flowed out of that. I moved to LA, and that was it.
Was it the same as what you imagined when you were 3 years old?
uh, you know, I'm not really sure why I became so possessed with that idea. I mean, I think in hindsight, it might be that I wanted to be able to pretend to be somebody else, that I was very insecure and shy, and I wanted to live a different kind of a life than that, and pretend to be other people. But it's been, it really has been a dream come true. I mean, it really is. Acting is the thing that inspires me and drives me, and I love it. I really do.
Great. Laura, as a composer, a woman composer, I imagine that you don't see many role models, or maybe I'm wrong about that, but so how did you come to imagine that you would have a career in entertainment in Hollywood?
First of all, I can't believe Anita Hill is asking me anything, but let's just move off of that. I can best Gina just by a few years on this one, and that my mother decided that I would be a composer when she was pregnant with me. So she was a painter, and she thought music was the highest art. And for me, so there was not a question that would be something that I would do, but I thought I was going to be an East Coast intellectual. And I grew up in LA, and my dad was a cardiologist, and he had a lot of celebrities in his practice, and a lot of Hollywood people. But I didn't think that was my dream. But I was obsessed with drama. I was obsessed with opera. I was obsessed with plays. Like, I read all Shakespeare. I read all of Eugene O'Neill's plays. And so I was kind of moving towards it. And I went to New York, and I studied with the most intellectual guy that I could find. But in sort of interrupted by that, I went to France and studied with a very famous teacher of composers. Her name was Nadia Boulanger. And she was great. She was very old by the time I got there, but she was great friends with Stravinsky, and she had trained Aaron Copland and Piazzolla and a lot of great composers. And she was surrounded by women. So it wasn't just her. It was Louise Halma, who was an American composer, and Mademoiselle, who I don't know what her last name was. I'm not sure she actually had one, but she taught like really hardcore ear training, which is kind of technical work for composers. And I think I realize now in retrospect that I had these models that popped up. There were never any, certainly no Hollywood composers that you knew of, and really no concert music composers that you knew of. And now we know, of course, they've been around, but they just have been made invisible. So I pursued this dream and then wound up at Sundance as kind of their new music person. And then from then on, I fell in love with scoring to picture, and the rest is, a work in progress, let's put it that way.
Well, it sounds like you, for both of you, it was really a lot of work. It wasn't that sort of instant story of success that you read about or hear about in the movies.
I think that's the only place you hear about that. The truth is, I think for everybody, that it's always a long, hard road, and you pop at certain times and you don't at other times.
So, Karen, I'm not even sure that until about a year ago, I knew what a producer was. When did you know that you could be a producer or would be a producer?
It's interesting because I think I've even grown to a better awareness of what a producer is just in life, just sort of making things happen. When I was young, I wanted to be in the arts, but my parents were scientists. And, so I kind of had that, and I kind of had a bundle of contradictions that I was very confident, internally, but I was really shy on the outside. So I was trying to kind of figure out, I knew I wanted to be in the industry, finally got the confidence to kind of come out here, and then looked at the list of crew, names of people at the end of the credits and tried to figure out where I fit in. And through that exploration, I realized that the putting it together and the literally producing and making something come out of nothing was something that was sort of natural to my personality, and did it mostly as a studio exec for 20 years until I got the chance to do the short. And I realized that this really was what I was, sort of destined, at least in my mind, to do, is to sort of make something appear out of nothing, against all odds. That really kind of, to me, became what it meant to be a producer. And I think every day I become more sort of aware of what that means and sort of how to sort of hone that craft.
Well, we're going to talk about your short in a bit, so just hold on to that thought. But I want to ask Alma. Alma, when I read your bio, I think of you as an artist, and I don't know if that's just my interpretation. But what led you from a career in advertising to a career in entertainment?
I kind of missed what you said. You see me as an expat? I wasn't sure what you said.
No, as an artist. I mean, that's what your work brings to mind. Someone who is really, truly an artist.
Thank you. Well, I'm also an immigrant, so I was born in Tel Aviv, and I was raised here. I really only came here at the age of 30, and it wasn't because I was pursuing a career. It was because I was pursuing my heart. I was in love with a director who lived here in Los Angeles by the name of Boaz Yakin, and I was already a director in Israel, but I've encountered the same challenges of gender inequality, obviously, over there too, as many women do around the world. And it seemed like just every step had so many kind of, levels to it. It's not that I didn't want to make films right away, but I just had no example of how to do that and no opportunity to do that. I didn't grow up with a family of artists. My parents were very much like blue collar, I would say creative people, but definitely their jobs weren't creative, and they were just kind of getting by month to month, paying rent and things like that. And we're very busy with that and with issues of addiction and alcoholism and things like that. So really my life was much more shaped by that. And I think I found filmmaking and expression in general as just a form of, it was just like a lifeboat. It wasn't really that I had a plan and I was like, I'm going to do this and then I'm going to go to Hollywood or I'm going to be that. It was just, how do I say something or find a way to get a sense of self that would allow me to stop feeling like I'm sinking all the time into the same patterns that I grew up with. So I guess I started with just, video art and music videos. And when I came here, I did music videos for probably almost 10 years or 8 years and couldn't even get to commercials. And at a certain point, I just sort of took a camera and went to the Salton Sea in California in the desert and directed a documentary by myself with no crew, and it won the Tribeca Film Festival. And after that, I suddenly got opportunities to direct commercials, and from there to also meet other artists and filmmakers and actors like Shia LaBeouf, who saw my documentary and admired it and reached out to me very kindly. So it really kind of opened up everything when I just kind of took it into my own hands and made something that people can see and appreciate. But prior to that, it was just years of, working on, I guess, low budget music videos and having not much of a future that I could see.
Well, it does sound to me like, from hearing every one of you, that you have found yourself. And that you're in a place where you understand your craft and your purpose with your work. So I just want to ask you, at this point in your career, how do you want, what do you want your work to represent? How do you want the world to see your work? And we can start with you, Alma, because it's, something you said prompted me to think about that.
I guess I'm really, keen on, in general, as an artist, I guess, finding your own voice and doing something that, in a way that only you can do, has always been sort of my tendency. And you could say it's a dream, but it's also just like a natural discourse where I'd say I'll prefer to do something that only I can do than to make the best whatever, right? Like masterpiece. Like I just really want to find my voice and the words to say exactly what you want to say. And that's the joy of really expressing your connection to life and your existence and your relationship with this world. And I'm very drawn, obviously, from just because of how I grew up and where I'm from, to people that are flawed, people that are dealing with hardship, with difficulties, whether it's psychological, emotional, or racial, or financial, all of those things. Immigrants, people that, weren't really born with a plan, weren't really born with a path. And I think womanism and womanhood and feminism includes all of that, because so many of us as women have to really make our path, and not just find it, as opposed to finding it. Sometimes we have to make it. So I guess, like in my work, I guess I do find myself living in that world. But I'm also really extremely interested in the subconscious and dreams and imagination. So it's really in the intersection of all of those things, I think, that I find myself operating. And I just find sometimes that when we talk about gender equality, that there has been somewhat of a limiting expectation when we now talk to women directors to represent a certain, identity for women, whether it's like only writing or directing things that have a certain kind of role models and things like that, even though obviously I couldn't fight harder and agree more that we need great role models on screen and that it's life-changing for girls. I also want to see flawed women. I also want to see women directing men's stories. I want to see, I want to step out of that box of the expectation of women only being hired for certain stories.
So, anybody else have that pressure, that feel the pressure to represent all womankind in your work, or have you really thought independently? I'm sure you're all independent thinkers. Have you thought about what you want to represent in your work outside of that pressure? You have that kind of freedom.
Alma, something you said really resonated with me about the whole idea of role models and everything. Which is that when Thelma and Louise came out,
Yes.
the
Yes.
reaction of women that I met, who recognized me on the street or whatever, was so different from anything I'd experienced, and they were so passionate about what it meant to them and how it impacted them, and it made me decide, made me realize that we give women so few opportunities to come out of a movie feeling inspired by the female characters.
Mm-hmm.
And then almost every movie that comes out, they can identify with the male character and have a vicarious experience, but it's so rare for women. So from then on, I decided that I wanted to choose roles with the women in the audience in mind. What are they going to think about my character? How's it going to make them feel? And it was very specifically not about finding role models, because I'm with you. I think role model, this whole idea that female characters have to be role models is very limiting. Flawed, messed up characters, just like people, women need to be colorful and interesting and complicated characters. But something I do look for is women who are in charge of their own fate, or who can become in charge of their own fate. And for good or bad, make mistake, whatever, but at least you're driving your own car and might be off the cliff. But but that was quite an awakening for me, to think about how we really have to increase the opportunities for women to live vicariously through characters.
Well, God help us if flawed people can't be role models. I don't think there would be any role models. So I want to hear also from you, Laura and Karen. At this point in your lives, you've done so much and you've achieved so much. What do you want the world to see when they see your work?
I'll answer it in an odd way. And it in relationship to something I've just finished working on, which is a show for HBO called Lovecraft Country. And in Lovecraft Country, and I'll try not to give anything away, there are these women emerge in these powerful positions. And it has been my honor to score them with music that's almost appropriated from a genre that has been typically male. And so it's giving these Black women what has been perceived of throughout film scoring history as white male superhero music. And to have a woman, me and a Black man, Raphael Saadiq, create this music for these strong female characters has been a crazy and really, really beautiful experience. And in many ways, it's playing into genre rather than away from genre, so that it's falling on a lot of the tropes that we've seen in other kinds of films that are, as I said, traditionally male. And for me, it's been fun because I think for really one of the few times in my career, I've written big movie music, big, almost old-fashioned movie music, and it's been a real pleasure. So, I mean, for me in my life, I do a lot of different things. I have concert music, which is really, a kind of a direct vision of my own personal voice as a composer. As a film composer, it is necessary for me to take that vision and take my personality and do it in service of great directors like Alma. But in this particular case, the showrunner, Misha Green, who's a genius, wanted us to play with these genres. And that has been, I think, deeply moving and empowering.
Great. Well, when you talk about empowerment, that really is what we're talking about with gender equity, isn't it? So, Karen, you're both a studio executive as well now as producer of creative work. How you can choose either one in either role. What do you want your work to represent?
Well, I got inspired to come to the industry because I wanted to make seminal movies. And it's the Thelma and Louises and things that really just stuck with you, that changed you. Like on a cellular level, these movies kind of changed me as I grew up. And I wanted to be a part of that. I wanted to make movies that really landed in some way. And a lot of them moved the needle in some way, so that they sort of opened up a perception, or changed just what I thought was possible, changed my mind about things, changed my heart. And so those are the movies that I really want to keep pushing. So looking at, like you said, the traditional male roles, and thank you, Gina, for all of your work I know you're going to talk about, but just to really go, okay, this would have been done for a male, this would have been done for someone white. What would it look like for a person of color or a woman to inhabit those, so that they can be as varied and have the spectrum, and keep pushing what that looks like. And I every time, if it's already been done, it's like, that's not where I want to go. Although I love, Laura, what you're saying is like, okay, it's been done for men before, but how do we show it with a Black female, or how do we really push it? And it opens our minds. And I think every time we do movies like that, I just want to be part of that conversation, part of that process.
A couple of you have alluded to the fact that, you have experienced gender inequality in this career that you've had. And so, this is the discussion of the day. So let me just ask you a few questions on those lines too, because I think people really do think that the fairy tale is true, that you get here, you become successful, and it's all the path is just a bed of roses. To mix metaphors, that it's an easy path, but it does sound like you had a lot of work, and I'm sure you've met a lot of challenges. Now, 3 of you have started your own organizations in response to some of the challenges that you've seen. And Karen, of course, you were talking about working within the role of a studio exec to address some of the gender inequities that you've seen. But I'd like to hear from each of you, what was it maybe that sparked you to start your organizations? I mean, Gina, we know about the number of ways that gender imbalances occur in the industry on film. How did you then decide that you wanted to do something about it and start your institute?
People maybe have heard this story before, but when my daughter was a toddler and I started showing her little kids shows and preschool things, I immediately noticed that there seemed to be far more male characters than female characters in the 21st century in what we're showing to kids. And I didn't intend in the beginning to make it my life's mission or anything, but I couldn't find anybody else who said, I know, right? I noticed too. And in fact, when I talked to people in the industry, they all said, no, but that's not true anymore. That's been fixed. We fixed it. And I thought, okay, nobody sees what I'm talking about. And I think this is profoundly important to fix. And so I decided I wanted to get the data. And the purpose of the data was very specific, that rather than trying to educate the populace about this problem, I wanted to go directly to the creators very privately and say, hey, I don't think you realize this, but what do you think? And so that's what we've been doing for about 15 years, and is working, directly non-judgmental in a supportive, collaborative way to say, I don't think you realize this, but how about we improve it?
And your focus was children.
She's being very
Yes.
modest. Yeah, it's brought huge change in those PG-13, especially in movies that like started to inspire you. It's almost reached parity. We're still suffering, but the children movies have become so much better with representation.
Well, and I honestly believe that it goes beyond, your influence has gone beyond the movie industry, well beyond. I mean, the information and data is so rich that it's informed a lot of the way we think about work and gender. And Karen, as I was thinking about Gina and her work, and what sparked her work was really her daughter, and what was her daughter seeing. And I'm thinking about Hair Love. And as I watch it, you've got these three characters. I don't know how you captured them, how they were captured in such a short film, but you got a sense of all three of the characters. But did you write Hair Love for children? Did you write it for your younger, your child self? I mean, I saw my child's hair story of being hair shamed by a little white classmate. I saw that in Hair Love. And so what did you, how were you thinking about Hair Love in terms of issues that children are facing and getting wrong messages about?
Sure. I mean, Hair Love was such a blessing, and it came to me, Matthew Cherry, who kind of got the idea for it, and it still surprises me how many layers it sort of touches in terms of my growth as a Black woman, just so many things. We kind of poured our hearts into it. Matthew was seeing online dads posting about them doing their daughter's hair. And the funny thing is, this goes to sort of the gender bias, is that when women do their daughter's hair, that's just a Monday, but when a dad does a daughter's hair, it's like, oh my God, praise the guy, he did the hair, and the truth is a lot of dads are doing their daughter's hair. And so part of what Matthew wanted to show is just to normalize that, so that you really, and I think it's really important for, to showcase that and show that you can have a Black man that has fits the description of, tattoos and, and all those things that you may perceive him a certain way, but you're really showing that he can take on sort of nurturing parental roles just like the woman. And so that was really one of the first ways that we came into it. And for me, having two boys, that was a big part of it. But then, as you said, the hair was a whole nother level of, this was the first time after 20 years in the animation business that I was sitting in a room, brainstorming with other people of color about our experiences and how we could put all of that in us. And it absolutely took us all back to our childhood and, me growing up in Texas and being the only Black girl in my class for years, and sort of how, the pressure to press your hair and straighten your hair, and just my journey to, have natural hair, as an adult. And so there are all those things of sort of what it meant to shame your hair, what it meant to love your hair, how important it was to see yourself on the screen, how important it was for a father to kind of listen to a daughter as she's sort of trying to sort of go through her own hair love journey. So yeah, it really did tap into all those things. And again, it just goes to like the very few images that are out there. We were so impressed with how much people saw it and how much they needed it. And it just really kind of fuels me to just go crazy to just do as many more images as we can that kind of tap into those issues.
Well, it resonated on so many levels with me. And I've told people who haven't seen it, just sit down and watch it, and love having conversations with people about it. I had not thought about women composers until I met Laura about 2 years ago. And I don't know if you remember our conversation, but I
do.
I
cornered you.
You were very clear. you might have spoken about the Alliance for Women Composers.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I know the visibility was really important for you. Has the Alliance been able to enhance the visibility of women composers?
I think shockingly, yes. I mean, first of all, I want to go back to Gina and what she did. When Gina started her institute, we couldn't even talk about sexism. Like nobody. If you were interviewed in a trade magazine and someone said, well, what's it like being a woman composer? You literally couldn't answer it because you were afraid you would never work again. So Gina really, really has skin in this game that is so, so significant. We're all so unbelievably grateful to her. For the Alliance, what happened is composers were included. There are a couple of major researchers in Hollywood, as I know you know, but Dr. Martha Lowson is one of them. And she included women composers in her figures for the first time in 2014. So numbers don't whine and numbers don't lie. So when you have a number, and in our case, that year, it was 2% of the top 250 box office films were scored by women. Now we're up to 6%, which is great, No, it's good, it's better. But when you have a number, then you can go to people, and it's not like you're complaining, but you have something just to show. And it's a very, very simple thing. And what we did, I have a good friend who's a political consultant, and she said, you need a directory. You just need a directory. And I thought, okay, well, that's easy to do. Because there were a lot of us, but nobody knew about us. So if you were looking for a woman to score your film, you would be told by agents and producers and studios that there just weren't any women. And this is true across the board for below the line talent. And that was totally a fiction as well. So when we put this directory together, and we started with 30, and now I think there's 700, that was radical in its own way by saying we exist, and when you're looking for a woman composer or a woman composer who's Latina or who's Black or who lives in Chicago, we can help you find that person. And that, I think, has proved to be very significant. And I think as a result also of an increasing awareness, I think Me Too, I think Harvey's Falling and all of that. Now there are diversity programs. Now certain studios have diversity requirements in terms of who they pitch. As you probably know, the Academy we just did new diversity requirements for the Best Picture. So there are these things emerging which are really, really significant and important. I think will have an impact, but we still have a tremendous amount of work to do and a long way to go.
Yeah, we do. But, speaking of the directory, Alma, you saw a similar need in starting Free the Work.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we actually made also a database together with Laura for composers as part of our organization. Yeah.
So are you seeing results from Free the Work? And can you tell us a little bit more about it?
Yeah. So Free the Work in its, the way it started, it was Free the Bid. And the way I started it was in 2016. I was at the time a commercial director. It was before I made Honey Boy, my first feature that got me the honor to be in the Academy. But really what was happening is there was a 3-bid system where on every commercial and every advertisement that was done, advertising agencies and brands would have 3 directors bid on them, and it was always 3 men. So I was starting to get really big campaigns and noticed that I'm always bidding against 2 men, and there's never any women around me almost. Of course, there were a few, but we were kind of traveling in different circles. Almost every production company only represented 1 or 2 women in their rosters, and they would have 10, 20 men. So I started Free the Bid, which was kind of a way to say, we're not demanding you to hire us, but we're demanding that you let us bid, because the excuse was that our reels are not big enough. And it was like this cycle of endless lack of opportunity, because you can't make your reel bigger if you're never even bidding. So the idea was, okay, we're going to get all these brands to say one of the three has to be a woman. And within 1 year, and we built a database. I built a database back then in my kitchen, which was on my laptop, which was just all these directors. It was about, I think, 100 directors at the time when we started. And within the first year, we took brands like HP, who had 0 women directors on all of their global campaigns, to 58% women directors. And we worked with them to kind of make sure that they, once women were in the room and got to bid and got to pitch, a lot of them got, obviously got the job because they had great ideas and they were very competitive and they did the work better than anybody in some cases. So it made me see the lack of opportunity, not just for women, but also for immigrants, for people of color, for trans women, which would be included in this conversation, and other, gender expressions and preferences. So we started Free the Work and tried to really bring the same elements into film and TV. And our database now, today, we have partners like Amazon Studios, Jen Salke, who's been like a really great partner to us, and Procter & Gamble, which almost reached parity with most of their brands, and they are the biggest advertiser in the world. So we're both in film and TV, and we have over 2,000 creators around the world in 45 countries, which we operate in, and we also do programs in those countries, and we have ambassadors in each one of them, and kind of study the inequality in those places. But really what it is, it's a tool that allows you to bring tech in the same way that Spotify, I guess, is our model in some ways, brought tech into the ability to search for music. You could search for directors, for cinematographers, for editors, for composers, and for other below the line roles that we're slowly building, like colorists and editors. And it kind of recommends you also artists based on your search, and you can make playlists, short lists, and share them with your producers. So it's really a tool for people to find talent. When you ask if we made change, I know we made change, but I also know that at the end of the day, I still get those texts at, 11 o'clock at night from a producer saying, hey, we really were told by such and such that they want us to hire a woman. And can you help us find it? So there's still this component of whenever the clock is ticking and people have less and less time, somehow they don't write it into their schedule to discover talent and to discover the women or the people of color, Black identified or other. If it's they're searching for something, and in the last minute they find themselves saying, oh my God, I don't know any. So it's not, so I can still see that it's not a long year organic process of people educating themselves and making sure that they have their favorite directors in all of those categories. If I would corner them and ask them who's their favorite 10, whatever, probably all male, and then in the last minute they text me or look at my site to find somebody so they can recommend it. I'm waiting for the moment where I want to see the excitement about discovering talent. I want to see the excitement of people about hiring women. So it's not just a chore or something that you're being pushed to do because of some.
I know. I think a lot of people have this idea of, we can check the box with women, as opposed to really being engaged and committed to having better gender representation. It's just something that you have to sort of do and then move on to the things that are more important to you. There's so much we haven't covered, but I really want us to think about, some of the challenges that we still face. And one of the things that I am absolutely certain that we are all still facing is a subject that has been brought up in different ways, but that is, how do we make sure that when we say gender, that we're covering the broad range of gender, in terms of all kinds of diversity, that seems to be missing, and and until we have it, we cannot have full gender equity. So I want to ask you, how do we really begin to have that full understanding of what gender means? How does gender and inclusiveness and diversity figure into your work? And I'll just start off by saying I've heard you mention it, Laura, in your creative work about composing music for Black women. And I know, Gina, you have initiatives that involve inclusion and diversity. Can you just tell me more, each of you tell me more about those?
Yeah, well, so we have always used an an intersectional lens when we're talking about this. That it's called. Well, my institute is called that it's on gender in media, but really we're looking at all underrepresented segments of the population, and because the goal is, let's start reflecting the population as it is, and because we judge our value by seeing ourselves reflected in the popular culture. Oh, there's somebody that looks like me, I must be valuable to this society. And if you don't see yourself, you get the message that you're not worth anything. And so as you said, I think it is very, very important to cast as broad a net as you possibly can to define inclusion. And as you said just a little bit ago, it's not just checking a box. Well, we have a woman now, so when we did that, we are fully half of the population, and there's all versions of being woman that we need to embrace.
So, Karen, one of the things that you have done recently is that you've written a letter that has become sort of an open letter to women in animation. And I'll let you tell us about that letter, because the question that I want to ask, though, is when you think of the approach that you took with women in animation, is developing allies really critical when it comes to creating these inclusive communities that we all want to live and work in?
Yeah, I think that is the thing that things that keep me up at night are the things that Alma and Gina are mentioning, that we want those, we want our work to reflect the world that we live in, and we know that the people that are marginalized understand why they want a seat at the table and they want their voice heard. But until the people that have the seat at the table and already have their voice heard understand it from a very just gut level that has to happen and they want it, then we're going to be putting, requirements and quotas, or if there's not, women that are leading and making decisions, if we're off on a vacation, what decisions would be made when we're gone? It's like, how does it become so systemic in that way that it just is what it is, I think, I remember, Gina, when the Institute, when I was first aware of it, it seemed so revolutionary, but it's like, I can't wait till the future where it's like, of course, it's like, you don't need it, it just is what it is. But the letter you're referring to was, after George Floyd, Marge Dean, who runs Women in Animation, wanted women of color to kind of speak to how they were feeling, and and how I was feeling was, in Los Angeles there were riots, and there were things that were happening at the Grove and places very close to us and dear to us. And sort of the next morning, one of the newscasters said, but LA will bounce back, we always will. And that's what kind of just struck my nerve, like, well, part of LA will bounce back, but what about the underlying problem? And I've got 2 teenage boys that are roaming the earth now and doing things that they want to do and being silly kids, and I'm scared every time they go out of the house. And and what I was just imploring is that in every moment in civil rights, movements, for people of color at least, it's the non-marginalized, it's the white people that needed to be allies for the cause when it really kind of took hold. And so that's really was my plea to women in animation, of like, we have to make these changes, we have to make them quick and in a hurry. We have to not be, polite anymore. We have to sort of be pretty aggressive about the way that we do it. And we need those allies, and we absolutely need it in the gender discussion. And I agree that this is really bigger than, I'm on a council at Sony to kind of respond to the George Floyd social justice. But really, we're talking about sort of Black numbers in our movies. But really, once we tackle any marginalized community, we do the same it's the same struggle. But we need the majority to really kind of see it in the same way that we know it's as urgent as it is.
Right. And I know, Laura, that when you became a member of the Academy, that you were the woman in the group, in the music group. How much has changed? Do you see progress in the Academy? I know they're hosting us, but we can talk frankly about them, because these dialogues are about frank conversations. So, how much progress have you seen, and how much do you think it's still a case that women are the only women in the room when important decisions are being made or discussions are being had?
I think all of it's true to an extent. When I was admitted to the Academy in 2015, and I basically got sponsored to be a member of the Academy, I never thought I would get in, and that I was going to make a big stink about it. That was my big plan. and then I got in, but it was something that I never felt that I would be included in, because it was always very guarded. And it was an insane idea to run for governor after I'd been a member only for a few months. But I got into the room, and what happened is the first time I was in on an executive committee meeting, which are the kind of the smaller groups associated with each branch, was the membership meeting. And I was literally allowed a seat at the table. At that point, there was one other woman in the world, Saida Garrett, great songwriter and lyricist. She had been the only woman in the room for 10 years. So it was me and Saida. And they were trying to make a big diversity push. And I had brought all these names to the table. And the first one began with a B. So you go down the list alphabetically. So right off the bat, my first Academy meeting, I had to strongly advocate for a woman composer. And what I had to do at that time was explain, because her credits were being dismissed as not being Academy worthy. And what I had to explain was her credits in the playing field that we are given were massive. And I pointed to the guys and I said, this is like you scoring a Pixar film. The fact that she scored this film and it won Sundance. It's that big a deal. And you have to, and so I was able to kind of, and it was painful, but I was able to educate a room full of men about the differences between what we were at that point allowed to do and what the opportunities that they had. And I think, honestly, as a result of that meeting, I was elected governor, because I think that my branch realized that there was a real need for this, and because of the advocacy work that I'd done through the Alliance. But I have to say that at that point, I'd been an advocate, sort of very publicly for about 3 or 4 years. And in that moment, in that 3 hours of the Academy meeting, I felt that I had done more good than I'd done in the entire 3 years before, because of the level that I was playing at. So with a lot of really wonderful men, and now women, because all those women that were admitted are now sitting on that executive committee, right? So that's how it really happens, that you get people in, and then you get them, a seat at the table, literally, and then changes happen, and you find these ways that you can expand the rules. For example, we started a short list because I and other people really believe that by having a short list, you could see more diversity in that short list instead of just the 5 nominees, right? So last year we had Michael Abels, we had Catherine Bostic, we had people who might not have been amplified if only the nominees were amplified. So I think it's been, for me, this working in an institution has been really interesting because you figure out how to navigate the rules, change the ones that you need to change, and then make them work for you in order to push the field forward. And I do think that an Academy membership has been really helpful to people. It elevates people. And so it's been good work. The boardroom is way more diverse than it was when I got there, in terms of people of color and women. It's much, much better. We've had some big victories, and now it's time to turn the page and to move to the next stage. And what I've always said is that, I want the alliance to grow bigger than you can possibly imagine in 5 years, and then we want to be gone, because at some point, all of us want to stop talking about this, right? All of us want to go beyond continuing to need to have this conversation. So the goal is to have a completely equal playing field where, you're known for, oh, she did this score, or, oh, she made that movie and I love it, so let's hire her to do this or that. That's where we all want to get. And it's wonderful to have these conversations, and I can't wait till we stop having them too.
It's almost as though you're saying, I want to, work my way out of a job.
Yeah. Yeah, out of the app. Certainly I want to keep composing till nobody wants to hear from me anymore. But I think we all want to work our way out of the advocacy jobs, and go back to being full-time artists. But in fact, that's impossible to do until we've opened this thing up and we've cleared the pipeline for younger women and underrepresented people. And we see people at the top doing whatever work they want to do without being typecast or having their qualifications constantly questioned.
I'm going to end with 2 questions. One-word questions. And they are this. First of all, in one word, where do you want to see more gender balance? Secondly, what gives you hope? Okay, so those 2 questions, you can think about those. And you had a comment, Alma.
I'm actually, my comment is actually an answer to your question. So, I should have just been patient and wait, but I am an Israeli, so we always jump ahead and lack those talents of being patient. So yeah, my answer is actually exactly to what you were saying, because Laura said something so important to me, which is, she said, we can't wait to go back to be an artist full time and not need to necessarily do the advocacy. And I think a lot of artists and a lot of filmmakers that do the work, feel the toll of needing to activate parts of their brain and their social skills and their advocacy and activism that sometimes often really bite into their time of being an artist and they start to question themselves, who am I right now? And the thing that really has touched me this year, when we speak about institutions and organizations, we just spoke about the Academy, but I had the honor to win a DGA award this year as a director for Honey Boy. And when I was there, I really kind of took the time on the few minutes I had on stage to speak about the Parenthood Penalty Campaign, which I was part of. And I know, Gina, I believe you also was part of that campaign. And you asked where else we want to see this gender equality. And really, to me, it's kind of it's not just about the representation. It's not just about finding the talent. It's about really understanding that the whole system is rigged, that everything was built by men for men. And for all of us to really thrive and allow for these talents past their first film or past, their experiences that kind of get them discovered or seen, how do they survive past that when women lose their health insurance in their most vulnerable year, because the way the insurance was built is that if you do not show up enough in that year on set, so you lose it, right? If you don't have enough days. And the fact that like parenthood in general is being looked at as something that just women do as opposed to men too, So I think like what we have to look at is and where I would love to see more gender equality is not just in discovering the talent, but making sure that that talent is has a sustainable career, that the things that are supposed to support that are already supporting men would support also underrepresented creators, whether it's people of color or of certain social, economical, or immigrants or women, trans women, and all these people that really don't have a chance sometimes, even once they get discovered, because of all sorts of things that we're not taking into account.
Right. So more, I'm going to chalk that up as more balance toward parenting responsibilities. But I'm looking at this. A system is made up of parts.
Yeah.
So what are the parts that you all see? And you mentioned parenting, there being a penalty for parenting. So that's just one part of the system. There are many parts, and I think we think of the system, but it's hard for people at times to really comprehend the entire system. And so sometimes it's important for people to think, what is the one part that I know needs to be more fair, more inclusive, more better resource in order to improve gender balance. Any other examples that you could give? Any of you could give?
I have a kind of a little bit of a different answer in that when you're talking about the Academy, I want voters to appreciate the female aperture. And I think that sometimes it's difficult for people to see. And the thing that struck me is at the end of Little Women, which was really had incredible moments from the female aperture. She gives the baby to the husband as she's walking. Do you guys remember that scene when, and this is, I can't remember the year of Little Women, but let's say it's 1870 or 72. She gives the baby to the husband who's got the thing, speaking of parenting, on his chest, that you put the baby into. That was such a moment of female aperture and celebration. Gives the baby to the husband and then joins her sisters. And I think that people are not understanding what women and, all kinds of underrepresented groups are bringing to the table. And sometimes it can be super obvious and sometimes it can be super subtle. And I think that this is when you look at the diversity of experience and the sort of the diversity of the human condition, this is how it really can affect our field and what we're doing. These apertures are really significant and I appreciate them when I see them, and I think other people do too. In terms of the hope, my students, I teach at USC. The women are so aware. They support each other. They feel supported. They know they have a place to go in terms of, in my particular field, the Alliance or Women in Film and other organizations that have been started. And they're aware and they know what they're getting into, which I think is a really good thing at this point.
Great.
I would say that my theory is that if it happens on screen, it will happen in real life. And that's why I'm so focused, laser-like on on-screen depictions. And we know things like, it's just that media images have an incredible power to normalize things. And we know that there are so many more women than men now in forensic science, for example, because of CSI. Women saw it on TV, they said, wow, I could do that. Another interesting thing was in 2012, after Hunger Games and Brave both came out, girls' participation in archery skyrocketed to be the most populated category of competitive archery because they saw it and they said, oh, wow, I guess girls can do that. So also when I got to play the president on TV, I had very brief administration, but sadly, research found that after the show had been on, people were 58% more likely to vote for a female candidate for president. And so we really do need to take advantage of the power of these images to transform the world.
Mm.
Yeah, and I would say, maybe because it's the rooms I'm in, we unfortunately have an ability as the deciders, decision makers for these projects. You could talk about, let's say we're doing an Israeli project. There's still a weird problem where you don't look around the room and go, wait a minute, I'm not Israeli. I need Israeli people in the room. And it's got to be as crazy as when we see cigarettes in movies now that just look insane. It's got to feel that weird. If you're in a room, you have to have inclusion. So I don't know, I want systemic inclusion where that's just a normal thing that anybody would feel insane talking about something without that person in the room. And I also have hope because I think the kids get it and they want it and are demanding it, and we need to just give them power to help us through this.
Okay. And your hope, Gina?
Oh, my hope is that that we can make this change happen fast. That in the time it takes to create a new TV show or create a new movie, we can change what the future looks like. We don't have to sneak up on this problem. We can make wholesale change right away, particularly on screen, the easiest place to do it, and things will change if we do that.
That's great. Well, let me just say, I have hope because of all of you and the work that you're doing. I have spent the entire weekend really thinking about the court and the loss that we are experiencing right now in terms of Ruth Bader Ginsburg and her absence and the absence of her voice, her aperture from the court. But what you give me is hope that change is happening in other places. And I believe that it has to happen in all places. It can't just take place in one part of the government or one part of industry. And I don't think that there's any industry that has the influence and the power to make it happen in other places than the entertainment industry. So I am hopeful that gender equity will be a reality, and I know that you will all be contributing to it. So thank you, and thanks for this conversation.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody. Hi, I'm Gina Davis. Thank you for watching Academy Dialogues.